Hello and welcome to this video, and on this video I'm going to be going through the 10 best albums of 1996, which of course means at the time of filming this video, which is January 2026, these albums will all become 30 years old this year. And it's an incredibly long time, because some of these albums it feels like I bought them yesterday. But let's not get on, worrying about my mortality. And let's crack on into these albums and see what we can learn about that year. So, the way I did this was I went on to Wikipedia and looked at the big albums that had come out that year. There was nothing on there that I was particularly interested in, that I thought was particularly good. I can be objective and say, well, I'm not really a fan of that band, but that was a really important album. But there was nothing like that, it seemed, in 96. I then went on to the Progressive Rock Archives to see what was happening in the world of progressive rock. And to be honest, the answer was not much. There was no albums there that I thought were either important or that I liked. So it went back down to my record collection. What did I buy in 1996? What did I think was the best? So all my CDs were there. Of course, 96 was perhaps the year where I had stopped buying vinyl completely. So everything I bought in 96 was on CD, and it was all there. So I went through all of that meticulously, pulling out the albums that I liked. And there wasn't that many, to be honest. Normally when I do this, I can end up with 20, 30 albums, and I pick the 10 best. So I pulled out all the ones I thought were really good. I ended up with 11 albums. So if you'll permit me, even though it says 10 in the title, it's actually going to be 11, because I've got one album bubbling under number 11, and it's this album. And this is a fantastic album, so it shows the quality of what I have got here. Well, I think so. So at number 11, I have The Last Wave by a band called Aana. Who are Aana, you might ask? Well, I will answer you with this answer. Aana was a supergroup put together in 1996 by Bill Laswell, and it featured him on bass. It featured the great Tony Williams on drums, and on guitar we had the free jazz guitar pioneer Derek Bailey. This is an incredible lineup and a very eventful occurrence in 1996. This is a difficult album for many people. I can understand that. Derek Bailey is a full-on free jazz guitarist, which means he is interested in exploring the total sonic possibilities of the guitar. But this is a wonderful album. This is beautifully recorded and beautifully produced by Bill Laswell, of course. And because of that, it's wonderful to hear Derek Bailey in that sort of setting. Because they're playing live in the room together, Derek Bailey's guitar is turned up quite loud, and he's almost got a distorted sound in there. It's quite aggressive, unlike some of the more familiar Derek Bailey albums that some of you may be aware of. My favourite Derek Bailey album, if you want to know, is Live at Colston Hall with Anthony Braxton. And I would say that would be a great starting point for Derek Bailey. If you want to hear the sort of classic sound, that really thin, papery, beautiful sound he gets out of a guitar. Here he's amped up, and alongside him is the great Tony Williams. Tony Williams, of course, died the following year in 1997 and did a number of recordings for Bill Laswell just before he died, which is, we're very lucky because it means we get beautifully recorded drums of one of the greatest drummers ever lived in the final phase of his career. Off the top of my head, he recorded on this album He recorded on the follow-up Aana album, which is much more like a fusion album, and I would say is one of the greatest fusion albums of the last 30 years. And he also recorded on, I think it was an album called Blacktronic Science by Bernie Worrell, which features some sort of almost like Jimmy Smith organ duo stuff. I don't think they've got the guitar, it's just organ and drums. And Tony Williams is majestic on those. This album is very difficult. It's noisy, free improvisation. If you're aware of what Laswell did with Sonny Sharrock in Last Exit, then imagine this is like a companion piece, but with Derek Bailey. But it's a landmark album. It's a brilliant album. The only reason I put this so low and it didn't make the 10 is because this is a difficult album to listen to. And when I put them all, I thought, which one am I going to take out? I thought it's going to be that one because this is a once every couple of years listen. This is something that like an Earth, Wind and Fire album that stays in the car for weeks. No, it's not that. I want to show you the packaging because I think the artwork is absolutely beautiful. As always with Laswell, the whole package is wonderful. If I just open it up, we get this sort of a... It's simple, it's not extravagant, but it's well presented. Absolutely lovely. So that's what I've got bubbling under at number 11. Right, so at number 10, I have another album that is very improvised, but nowhere near as free improvised as the Last Wave is. It's by the Pat Metheny group, and it's called Quartet. And those of you with that sort of level of intelligence to work these things out will have probably realised that this features 4 members from the much bigger Pat Metheny group at that time, which I always refer to as the Paul Wurtigo group. Paul Wurtigo being the drummer of that group. And this is my favourite period of the Pat Metheny group. So obviously we have Pat Metheny on various guitars and stringed instruments. We've got Lyle Mays on piano and various plinky-ponky instruments. We've also got Steve Robdy on acoustic bass and piccolo bass, and Paul Wurtigo on drums and percussion. Paul Wurtigo is an incredibly underrated drummer as far as I'm concerned. Perhaps because he always puts the music first and isn't one to showboat, but the guy possesses an ability on the drums which is quite astonishing. He's also capable of working in an incredibly avant-garde way. I think a couple of years later he did an album with Greg Bendian, Pat Metheny and Derek Bailey called Sign of 4, which is an incredible album of sort of free improvisation, recorded at the Knitting Factory. This isn't quite that. We've got 15 tracks on here. They are composed, although I think Montevideo... I'm pronouncing things in a strange... Because I've got the microphone, it's putting me off. Montevideo and Dismantling Utopia and Badland, I think, are group improvisations. But this is very improvised. And also, it's almost acoustic. Pat Metheny is playing acoustic, and of course his signature electric guitar sound. But he's also got his 12-string guitar, his 42-string Picasso guitar, ebows and slide. He's got soprano guitars, a fretless guitar, and of course his trusty guitar synth. There is a lot of acoustic interaction on here. Lyle Mays is playing piano, non-tuned spinet, Celeste, pedal harmonium, auto harps, electric piano, and clavinet. Steve Robdy is playing acoustic bass and piccolo bass. I've done that already, Andy. Come on, get your act together on this one. I really love this album. There's moments when some of these tracks rival some of the great recordings that he would do on albums at this time, especially the album that followed the following year, Imaginary Day, which is a real masterpiece. This almost seems like a forerunner to that, especially in the wideness of the sound palette. It's very dry recording. Sometimes this stuff is free improvised and is quite avant-garde. Other times you get the beautiful melodies which Metheny and Lyle Mays provided. It's a wonderful album. It's one of my favourite Pat Metheny albums. But all the Pat Metheny albums are great, aren't they, in the end? So that's what I got at number 10. Okay. In the mid-90s, here in the UK, we were in the aftermath of the sort of electronic urban dance music explosion that happened in the late 80s. And it's quite surprising what an injection into music that was, almost like sort of changing music forever. And once you'd had house and electro, then came jungle and drum and bass, and then we had big beat and we had trip hop and a whole bunch of music forms, which in their vision got bigger and bigger. And I feel that period that happened where you were having records by artists that were really out there, really conceptual, very epic, but also were selling a lot. In some cases, when I think of people like, say, Goldie or Aphex Twin or Massive Attack, this was like a second era of progressive rock. I was a big fan of the trip-hop artists at that time, Tricky, Massive Attack, Portishead. But for me, the best of the lot was Lamb, who came a little bit later, and this is their debut album. This is a wonderful album, which is a sort of mix. If you don't know Lamb, it's a mix between sort of very jarring, almost like drum and bass type beats, although it doesn't have that sort of, it doesn't have the sort of, 150 BPM punch of drum and bass. But it's very industrial, very electronic. But also the singer on here, which I've forgotten her name, beautiful ethereal vocals and almost like English folk music, but almost at certain points English classical music. As the band went on, they would embrace that sound more. And they're probably most well known for the track off here, which is Gurecki, which has an almost like sort of dark classical feel to it. If you're a progressive rock fan who can go to the outer limits, i.e. not someone who just likes Marillion and Genesis, this would be an interesting album for you to check out. I absolutely love it, especially the opener, Lusty, which is absolutely fantastic. Scott Larday over at the Prog Corner, he had a moan when I was on Rick Beato because I didn't say enough about progressive rock. And that's troubled me. It's been in my mind, the fact that he said that. And I thought, well, I can very easily just forget about progressive rock. He thought me as being part of the progressive rock family. I don't know whether I am. But I have to say, when I came to do this list, I thought, well, I'm going to have something from the prog world. And I went over to the prog archives, like I said, and had a look, and there was nothing there. And so I really wanted to make sure that there was something sort of proggy on this list. And it's an album I really, really like, which is why I've now got it at number 8 on the list. And it is this album, the Fire Garden Suite, or is it just called Fire Garden? This is just called Fire Garden, isn't it? And this is like the equivalent of a double album in old money by Steve Vai. And I really, really like this album, okay? Now, I know some people won't like it as much as some of his albums like Passion and Warfare and Flexible and all the classic ones. But I think there's some of his best stuff on here. Using sort of a very Zappa-esque terminology, he breaks the album into 2 parts. There's Phase 1 and Phase 2. Phase 1 is an instrumental album. If he had perhaps put that out on its own, we might be talking about this as one of the great instrumental prog albums of that era, because I think it's absolutely wonderful and equal to Passion and Warfare. Some incredible guitar playing on. There's a Fire in the House, The Crying Machine, Dying Day, Wookum, Blowfish, The Mysterious Murder of Christian Tierra's Lover, Hand on Heart, and then when we get to track 8, we get the track Bangkok, which is this very twangy sort of Eastern sounding tune, which then runs into the epic at the end of this album, which is the Fire Garden Suite, which is 10 minutes long. With the edition of Bangkok, we're up to nearly 13 minutes. It's almost like a side-long epic if we were back in the 1970s. And for me, the Fire Garden Suite is absolutely incredible composition, and a real virtuoso achievement. The lines that run on a choral sitar, guitar and piano together, absolutely incredible. There's some great music. Now, then we get to the more troublesome phase 2, where Steve Vai is singing. He made a little album of his songs, and some of them are a little bit, I'm not too sure whether even I like them. There's certain points in here where he's trying to sing sort of very poppy love songs. Now, we did it on Flexible, and I love the Boy Girl song. I think it's wonderful. Maybe I should return to it. But the thing is, there is a rocking track on here called Little Alligator, which for me features one of the greatest guitar solos, not just by Steve Vai, but by anybody. He just takes off and he flies, and he doesn't stop. I mean, it's 6 minutes long. And once you got verse, chorus, gets to the guitar solo, he just doesn't stop. And he sort of narrates the guitar solo a little bit in a humorous way, throwing in comments, I think it's wonderful. And so that with the great tracks on phase 1, I really love this album. It's one of my favourite Vai albums. Right, I think we're at number 7 now. At number 7, I have got this by Allan Holdsworth. Right, so, big fans of Allan Holdsworth. I am, at least. I think a lot of you are. If I do a Holdsworth video, the views are always very, very good. So there is a part of the Holdsworth community looking at me now for my opinions on Allan Holdsworth. Where do we start? This is like, in the Holdsworth catalogue, this is an anomaly, because this features a band he never had before or since. I'm having trouble with my words today. I knew this thing that happened with the, death and resurrection of my channel, that I was going to find it hard coming back because it's been so stressful, and I'm very aware that this is the first video coming back, and it's like I'm struggling a little bit. I will get back into it, don't worry. Don't worry. It's been a fraught time over the last week. That's all I'm going to say. You'll probably see this delayed now, so it's probably another week ago and I'm back on track, but I am finding it difficult to speak and say simple words. So, what is this album about? None Too Soon. This is the album of him playing jazz standards the Holdsworth way. It was recorded in his studio, the brewery, and there's extensive photographs of the brewery. And the lineup is very interesting because it has the great Gordon Beck on piano, digital piano. I wish it was real piano. I think that's the number one thing I don't like about this album is Gordon Beck's piano sound. His piano playing is remarkable, brilliant. Gordon Beck, of course, was a stalwart of the British jazz scene throughout the 70s, 60s, 70s and 80s, hooked up with Holdsworth, did a couple of albums which are brilliant, acoustic guitar and piano. Here he joins him on some jazz standards, and it really gives this album a sound and approach which is unlike any other Holdsworth album. We've got Gary Willis has popped over from Tribal Tech on bass, Kirk Covington from Tribal Tech on drums, and of course Allan on guitar and synth sax. And on here, Saturday is I just dropped the CD and it's gone rolling off across the thing. It's never like this normally, is it? Bloody hell, that's just all broken apart. Anyway, there's some lovely pictures of Allan. There he is in his studio, this big wooden affair that was built, which looks like it's an ADAT studio. There's lots of photographs of the sessions going on. And we'll also get a nice shot of, he had a brewery next to it. The studio was called The Brewery. I really love this album. Why? Well, we get to hear Allan playing jazz standards. That's the pull, isn't it? But the truth is, it's some of the most ridiculous guitar playing he ever recorded. Some of the solos on here are just astonishing. Now, I remember the track order's different. So if I went through the track order here, I think it's different to the actual way that it runs, and I can't see that. He deals full on with Coltrane, especially Giant Steps. Although on here, rather than tackle Giant Steps, he tackles the equally mind-boggling Countdown, which he approaches with no chordal backing to start off with. It's quite incredible. He's playing on sort of jazz blues like Isotope. Absolutely mind-blown to hear him take on a blues. He tackles jazz standards like How Deep Is the Ocean, Nuages very early. We get the more hard bop tunes like Inner Urge by Joe Henderson. He's obviously a big Joe Henderson fan. We get a sort of prog section where there's an original tune by Gordon Beck, None Too Soon Part 1, which goes into an interlude and then comes back out into None Too Soon Part 2. That is an anomaly on this anomaly of an album. If you go and listen to that, this sort of is more related to the Un-Merry-Go-Round in its structure. Very interesting. Which means if you're not a fan of jazz standards but you love Holdsworth, you have to get this album just for that. So it's really incredible, and it's Holdsworth. Now, at his best. But Holdsworth's always great. 1996, after this album, the cracks appear. I think he ends up splitting up from his wife. He loses that studio. He becomes a little bit of a nomad wandering around, trying to make a living through gigging. We really see the beginnings of digital recording in terms of a computer, which for Allan was a bit of a curse because he never actually gets around to finishing an album. And of course, the problems he had with alcohol and various other sort of psychological issues start to grab a hold. So we get... When would it be? Do we get... What albums are after this one? Seven Men and Tain is sort of... That's 2000, isn't it? So we're 4 years before that. There's not much that comes in after that. And 16 Men of Tain. I always call it 7 Men of Tain. 16 Men of Tain, his last real masterpiece. And then we get the sort of guitar synth created... soundtrack for Imaginary Film album. So, this is essential late stage Holdsworth, in my opinion. Let's move to another great guitarist from Yorkshire, who created a kicking album at this, one of his great, more recent albums, if you can say 30 years ago is more recent, and that is John McLaughlin with The Promise, an album that I played to death when it came out. So my CD copy is pretty wrecked. That's what it looks like. You see, the case is gone. And if I open it up, I have had this inner sleeve out so much that at some point I've had to rip the cover off. So I've just got that. Now, why is that? Why did the inner sleeve come out? It's because what we have here is John McLaughlin in the last stages of the old music industry, where he was signed to a reasonable record label. He's on Verve record labels with a budget, and he was able to fly around the world doing sessions with the greatest musicians that ever were at that period in time, and revisiting all different aspects of his previous career. In that respect, it mirrors in a way the Electric Guitarist album. Each track on here has its own lineup, and the lineup is absolutely shocking. And we get aspects of John's career on each track. So it opens up with Django, which is a tune by the Modern Jazz Quartet. It's a great choice to open up with because it shows John's love of Django Reinhardt, but also his love of the compositions of John Lewis from the Modern Jazz Quartet. The lineup on this, and I've got some of it missing, so off the top of my head, I know that it's obviously John McLaughlin's on there on guitar, and we also have him duetting with Jeff Beck on guitar. Now, his association with Jeff Beck goes right back to the mid-70s. They toured together, and they've often played together, but it's interesting to hear them together in this context. On drums, we have the great Mark Mondesir. I'm having to go from memory here because I haven't got the actual lineup for that one. On bass, who would it be on bass and keyboards? Not sure. I think it might be Jason Rebello on keyboards. and I imagine it is Michael Montezir on bass. I've had to reconstitute that out of my head, so let's see if I'm right. That's something you can go away and check out. Absolutely incredible John McLaughlin, absolutely incredible Jeff Beck. Very interesting to hear those two styles together. When I listen to it, I often wonder whether the edit got everything. There's quite a few tracks on here. Did the edit of that session capture anything? Everything. Because Jeff Beck is pretty incredible on it, and it's hard for John to sort of exist in that world when Jeff's pulling out just magic out of the guitar in the way he does. So I always feel that I don't get quite get enough from Jeff, although it's wonderful. So I often wonder whether his solos were sort of cut down. We then get Thelonious Melodious, which is a trio featuring him, the late great Joey Gianfrancesco on organ, and we get Dennis Chambers on drums. And I believe that this is possibly from the same session that the Live in Tokyo album came from. I love that album, but I have to be honest, this track, which is a sort of boppy blues in the style of Thelonious Monk, is my favourite thing they ever did. It's wonderful. We get Amy and Joseph and No Return. These are, one of them is like a sort of Miles Davis pastiche with, I think it's a little bit of Miles Davis spoken word on there. It's got drum machines on there. And a very annoying vibra slap sound in the drum machine pattern. The tune's great. It sounds very much like the sort of Translators band from the early 80s. Then we get El Ciego, which is John McLaughlin, Paco de Lucia and Al Di Meola. Wonderful stuff. Obviously could well have been recorded because at the same time this was recorded, I think the year before they did the trio album, which for me was a letdown. I think for the whole world it was a letdown. If you think that the original Live in San Francisco sold something like 8 million copies, that this is a big deal. And they recently brought out some other sessions from it, Saturday Night in San Francisco or something like that, whatever it is. And there was a big hoo-ha about that. But how many people mention the trio album from 1995 or whenever it is? Nobody does. It's interesting because it's not that bad. It lacks some of the fire. And again, this tune, El Ciego, which is written by John McLaughlin, is better than anything on that album. It's very interesting. Right, then number 6, we get the 15-minute Jazz Jungle. John McLaughlin at this point had flirted with the idea of returning to jazz rock fusion. The following year, he would do it with Heart of Things. He had picked up the electric guitar with the trio with Dennis Chambers and Joe Francesco. So this was the big moment. He was playing full-on fusion. They're in a studio, but they're jamming, and it goes on and on and on. And here, you don't feel like it's been edited. You feel like the whole session is there, and that's what makes me feel like the rest of the album could well be edited. This is mind-blowing stuff. It's almost like the Brecker Brothers lineup that was around just a few years before. So we've got Michael Brecker on tenor saxophone, John McLaughlin obviously on electric guitar, Jim Beard on keyboards, James Genus on bass, Dennis Chambers on drums, and Don Elias on percussion. This burns. It's full-on jazz rock fusion. And nobody in the 90s was playing fusion like this. It had all got very Larry Carlton. It had all got very precise displays of virtuosity and tasty licks, and no one was just burning. This was a big moment. This is the sort of standout track on this album. That's followed up by The Wish, which features Zakir Hussain on tabla, John McLaughlin on electric guitar, Nishat Khan on sitar, and Trilok Gertu on percussion, of course, a nod to Shakti. Then we get the most teasery, titillating track on here, which is 1 minute, 12 seconds of music called The English Jam. It's John McLaughlin on electric guitar, Sting on bass, Vinnie Colaiuta on drums. And I know Dominic Miller's in the room because I've spoken to Dominic Miller about it. This comes from the recording session that John did for the Hendrix tribute album where he does Wind Cries Mary. And this band's on fire. This band is on fire. So Dominic Miller's in there, even though he might not have been playing at this point in this jam, so it's why he hasn't got a credit. But this little 1 minute fade in and fade out of this jam is unbelievable. Where is this jam? Will we will we ever hear the whole thing? It sounds incredible. That's followed up by another sort of computery created track by John McLaughlin, i.e. with no drums on. It's John McLaughlin on MIDI guitar. It's arranged by Max Costa. It's got some two singers sort of emanating bird song, a little 40-minute decoration. And then we get Shin Jinri, which is David Sanborn on alto saxophone, John McLaughlin, and then Jim Beard, James Genus, Dennis Jameson, Don Elias. This points to The Unknown Dissident off Electric Dreams. Very mournful. Sanborn's beautiful alto saxophone. It's really great. It's 10 minutes. They really play on it. It's really great. And then it finishes off with The Peacocks, which features John McLaughlin and Philip Laurie on acoustic guitars and Jan Mraz on acoustic bass guitar, which I believe has come from the sessions that created his Bill Evans tribute album, which I would like to say is called Very Early, but I can't quite remember what the title of it is. So this is the last gasp for that sort of big budget fusion. At number 5, I have from Keith Jarrett, Tokyo 96. This is one of the trio albums. There's many of these. This trio had formed sometimes in the 1980s and then went all the way through until Keith was incapacitated. Of course, Gary Peacock is no longer with us. And, of course, neither is Jack DeJohnette. So it's the first time I've really looked at this since being aware that they're all gone except for Keith, who is incapacitated with illness. This was recorded live on March the 30th, 1996 at Orchard Hall in Tokyo. It's a lively selection from the trio, and this trio never made a bad album. They never made a mediocre album. They never made an average album. I don't think they ever made a good album. It was always excellent, incredible. And so this is one that I bought when it came out in 96, and this is one of the trio albums that I really love anyway, so it's one of my favourite albums by them. They play a lot of jazz standards, obviously, on here. It Could Happen to You, Never Let Me Go, Billy's Bounce, Summer Night, I'll Remember April, Mona Lisa, Autumn Leaves, Last Night When We Were Young, Caribbean Sky, John's Abbey, My Funny Valentine, and a tune called Song. It's quite lively, and it's interesting to hear them have a go at Billy's Bounce, which is quite bebop-y. Of course, on, I think it was Standards Volume 2, they did an incredible recording of Never Let Me Go, so beautiful. And this is not far off that either. So that's what I've got at number 5. Right, at number 4, I have a real jazz classic masterpiece. This should be on everyone's list of classic jazz albums from any era. And it is the album The New Standard by Herbie Hancock. This is an incredible album. So this starts off as a little bit of an experiment by Herbie. He wants to approach modern popular music as though they're jazz standards. It's not something that he invented. Other people have done it before. And when people do it, it can always be a little bit cheesy, as some jazz virtuoso, saws their way through I Should Be So Lucky by Kylie Minogue. It seems pointless, but here Herbie Hancock, I think because he has made pop records himself and has an actual love of pop music as well as jazz and all the other things, he seems to understand which ones to pick and where the worth is. Most jazz musicians picking pop music will pick something with more chord changes, perhaps something that swings, perhaps. He doesn't approach it like that. The lineup is sublime. It really is. Herbie Hancock on piano, Michael Brecker on tenor sax, John Schofield on guitar, Dave Holland on double bass, and Jack DeJohnette on drums with Don Elias on percussion. They all play brilliantly, and for all of them, especially Schofield and Brecker, this is one of their great albums as well. The tunes starts off with New York Minute, and then we get Mercy Street, obviously Peter Gabriel, Norwegian Wood, Beatles. We get a version of When Can I See You, which is by Kenny Babyface Edmonds. We get You Got It, Bad Girl, Stevie Wonder. Love is Stronger Than Pride, Sade. Scarborough Fair, Paul Simon. Thieves in the Temple by Prince. All Apologies by Nirvana. Manhattan, which is a tune by Herbie, an original, and then it finishes off with Steely Dan's Your Gold Teeth 2. And a really, really great record, beautifully recorded. Jack DeJohnette at his, but it's just, for me, it's one of the great jazz albums. And what's great about it is you don't feel like they're encumbered by the fact that they're slumming it playing, you know, lesser pop songs. The choice of pop songs is so varied, and they pull all sorts of unusual and novel approaches out of these songs. The All Apologies, which is one of the more mournful Nirvana tunes, you would think they would go into the darkness of that, but rather that it becomes a little bit more sort of funkier, you know, a little bit gospelier. It's brilliant. And there's moments on here where they're absolutely burning. It's one of Herbie's greatest albums. It will be in my 10 greatest Herbie Hancock albums. So that's what we've got at number 4. The 3 I've got here, I think, are all masterpieces. And I've had to eat my words here a little bit with what I've got at number 1, but we're not there yet. This is an absolute masterpiece at number 3. Meshell Ndegeocello and the album Peace Be On Passion. This is her second album. The album that preceded it, Plantation Lullabies, is an absolute masterpiece as well. But for me, sounds a little bit processed and programmed. Here we start to hear the musicians. And then Meshell carries on in her career, exploring more songwritery stuff, more sort of jazz-orientated stuff, and never really returns to this sort of neo-soul sound that she is not only exploring, but is pioneering here. This album is up there with Jill Scott. It's up there with Erykah Badu. They are the 3 for me. And the peak, the heaviest of them all, is Meshell Ndegeocello. The lyrics are cutting. She explores all sorts of themes, race, religion, and femininity, or however you want to describe it. The lineup is incredible. On drums, Oliver Jean Lake, who at that time was playing with Steve Coleman. They did a lot of M-bass players on this album. Wawa Watson's on here. Who else have we got on here? I imagine we've got Joshua Redmond's on here. Louis Conte's on here. Dave Fazinski's on here. It's the cream of sort of that New York jazz thing at the time. It kicks, it's funky, it's dark, the songwriting's beautiful. It's not the same all the way through. There's lots of different shifts. It really is one of my favourite albums from the 90s. So that's what I've got at number 3, is Meshell Ndegeocello. At number 2, and I nearly had this as number 1. I've had to eat my words with number 1. I've told you that already, haven't I? So at number 2, I have the debut album from Squarepusher. This is a landmark album for me. Squarepusher is a musician. He's a bass player. You can tell he's a big fan of Jaco Pastorius. He also does lots of slap bass. He also plays drums and keyboards. And apparently, so the story goes, when he didn't have any work on playing bass, he decided to make a drum and bass electronica album. He didn't have much equipment. He didn't have a computer. I know he had a drum machine and a sampler. I think that was about it, and something to record his bass on. And at home, he creates this absolute masterpiece. This is just... It's a high watermark for me in music. Squarepusher represents the peak of the mountain in terms of the progressive elements that emerge out of the sort of urban electronic music that is spewed out at the end of the 80s from the sort of dance music revolution. Now, this really was a revolution. When we say a revolution, is what happened in the late 80s with dance music. If you marry that up with hip-hop and stuff that's going on there, that is the death of rock and roll. It starts there. And the first signs of the death of rock and roll would be the grunge bands of the early 90s. And then rock's over. And then we go to a glorious period where all this stuff, whether it's trip-hop or big beat or drum and bass or jungle or rap or thrash metal or whatever it is, it seems to just froth around in all these incredible exploratory artists, albums, bands, which are selling records, whether it be Mr. Bungle, whether it be Goldie, whether it be Ronnie Size the following year, 1997. It's all incredible stuff. And there's a line that comes out of electronic music. It got known as electronica, I suppose. We could put Auteca in there. We could put Photech in there. We could put Aphex Twin in there. And Squarepusher's often mentioned in the same breath as that. But it's not that. It's something else. This is extremely experimental jazz. It's extremely experimental dance music. It's extremely experimental avant-garde electronic music. This is an absolute masterpiece. This is true progressive rock. I've got it at number 2. So what have I got at number 1? Well, I picked this album out and I thought, shall I even put it on the list? And then I thought, yeah, we'll go and put it on in the car. And so I've been listening to it for the last few days. And I've realised what a bloody masterpiece it is. Now, there's some video on here somewhere where I critique the Rolling Stones version of the greatest albums of all time. Because this album had got in the top 20 or something. And I said, that's ridiculous. It's not that great. But going back to it, it is better than I thought. So at number 1, I think the greatest album of 1996 is Endtroducing by DJ Shadow. Very apt, because throughout this video, the way I've set the lights up and decided to organise, every time I've held an album up, it's been obscuring my face and plunging me into darkness, which has been getting on my nerves. But actually, as we arrive at the end of this video, it does seem to have some sort of esoteric meaning, does it not? Especially with the events that have happened to me recently. DJ Shadow was a DJ, and he had this idea of making an album like a hip-hop scratch DJ would make an album. So this is assembled out of other albums. The incredibly iconic cover of these guys searching through vinyl sections in a record. I've never known which one's DJ Shadow. Is this DJ Shadow here? Assume it is. You flip over the back, you can have fun trying to spot some of the albums in this record shop. I believe that's a Steve Kahn album, is it not? There. This, at the time when I bought it, I was doing similar things production-wise. I thought, well, just got a whole bunch of old albums, and he slapped them together. And, I could do that. And what I think annoyed me about this album, going back to it, is that when you pull the details out here, and you try and find the records which have been used to create this, they're not there. And then when you go to the back, and this is very 90s, it says, written by DJ Shadow. Now, when this album starts up, there's like I wouldn't even say a sample, it's just playing a little bit of, I think it's a Stanley Clarke album, off School Days. I think it might be off Life Is Just a Game. And I'm like, well, that's Stanley Clarke. And that miffed me a little bit. Putting it on again now, there is a relationship between the sampling of, say, strings, piano, the use of choirs, against this sort of big, sort of almost like krautrock type drumming. It's proggy. The drums sound like they've come from krautrock bands. They're big, bonhomie, but they're also very, jagged and displaced. And there's a sound that's in there that, I have to be honest, has influenced me immensely. It's a sound that I still go back to now. There's a texture and a sound and a vibe to this album which is unbelievably important and influential. There's a certain sound here. Now, when I listen to all these sort of concoctions of different records all placed on top of each other in interesting ways, what's lacking for me is there's no central bit. There's no song, there's no singer, there's no rapper, and there's no soloist. Sometimes I want the music to do that, and I think that is something I found troubling. But actually, as a statement of that time in 1996, here we are 30 years later, I put it on, it doesn't even sound dated. If this could come out now, well, I'm an old bloke, maybe I can't hear how it could now, but I thought this really impressed me, looking back on it. If once he'd finished this album, he'd pulled in Wayne Shorter, and Wayne Shorter just could have, improvised his way through certain sections, just giving it that voice, this would be undoubtedly one of the greatest albums ever made. And I would love a jazz musician to try and do that at some point. I think it'd be very interesting. But I've just spotted a John Coltrane album here, Ballads. And we got a Benny. Is that Benny Carter or is that? It's not Ron Carter. Oh, I could spend hours looking at this. They got the jazz section right up close. Anyway, I could waffle on about this to the cows come home, but it is a really, really great album. Whether it's one of the greatest albums of all time and should reach any sort of top 20 of the greatest albums, I'm not so sure. But it is a great album, and I think this is the album of 1996. I know the rest of the choices here are very subjective. This is what I like, but I got to be honest, to me, if I'm being honest, they are the best albums of 1996. So that's what you've got here. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can like and subscribe and all that stuff, although I have promised myself to stop doing that on videos now after the great takedown that happened. I can't see any point in it anymore. But I can't see the point in many things at the moment. But I've got through it, haven't I? I've got through my return to mainstream YouTubing video after having a week of thinking, what am I going to do? So I've got through it. Not one of my best, I don't think. Not much laughs in it. I'm gonna have to oil the old funny bone. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? I'm going to have to find that place where the humour comes from, and I'm going to have to get back in it because I feel... I don't know, what am I saying at the end of this video? I like to have something profound at the end of my videos, or at least reach something. But what do you get at the end of this one? You get a man that was nearly beaten down, has gone through a period of wondering how I was going to pay the mortgage, the bills, what would happen to my family, what else can I do? Shall I have to get a normal job? Will the channel come back? Won't it come back? What am I going to do about all the videos? I've lost all the work I've done for the last 3 years. What is the point? Why is everybody calling me names online? Why are people making up things about me online? I've gone through that for the last week, and here I am back in, trying to roll it all off and go, well, that's all gone now. We're back in business, just like it was, before. But it doesn't feel like it was before, to be honest. It just doesn't. And I struggled with this idea of being some sort of corporate YouTuber that's here delivering what you want from an entertainment point of view. Never doing anything wrong, maximising the views, making sure that I do everything that like a good YouTuber should and not rocking the boat. Or doing what I have done up until now, which is sitting here and saying whatever I want to say and what's in my head, regardless. And I struggled with this over the week, and my conclusion was I should carry on just saying whatever I want to say. So I've struggled through this video. I've got my top 10 1996 albums out there. This was a little video. I was going to do something massive, but I didn't. I was going to do some big epic sort of French New Wave film where I'm like, I've gone all sort of, European, and I'm smoking cigarettes and not wanting to return because I've seen more purity in life than doing these low YouTube videos. I was going to do all that, but in the end, here I return with something that's quite small, really. This is one that will pull them in. But I've decided it's not all about just pulling them in, is it? It's about being part of this strange community that's developed here between the people who watch this channel and me sitting down and talking to you. And, part of it is talking about music, but part of it is just, I think, having a connection. And the overwhelming thing that happened last week was the connection I felt with my viewers, who just supported me no end. For the first few days was the worry that there was no money coming in, and there wouldn't be any money coming in, and they all jumped into my Patreon when I asked them to, and they all started signing up. And after about 2 days, I looked around and thought, we can get through this month now. We don't have to worry about the bills, And that was an incredible thing. So I thank you all. I thank you all for supporting me. But even if you didn't pay money, if you just signed up free to Patreon, or even if you were just online going, where's Andy? We want to see Andy, and putting that in, because who knows whether YouTube heard those voices. I can't say how humbled I am by it. I think that's what it is. I have an act here of being sort of arrogant and opinionated and all that type of thing, and I've been called that by many people over the last week. I might be, I don't know, but I don't feel it now anyway, and I don't think I was before. That is an act. It's there's a shtick going on here, I haven't done it for a week as well, remember? So that might be why I'm finding it difficult to jump back into Andy Edwards, the YouTuber, as opposed to Andrew Edwards, the dad and whatever I am in real life, Hold tight, you wait, I'm coming back. I'm coming back. Oh, you wait till you see Andy Edwards version 2. People thought I was arrogant and opinionated. You wait, world.